Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I would like to share my story on how I found Islam and how I became a Muslim. Anyway, without further ado, just let's get into it. Here it is. This is my story on how I became a Muslim. I was born in a very typical Finnish family, I think. We were Christians, but we were not religious. Like, religion wasn't a big part of our lives. And my parents never taught me and my brother about religion, basically anything. We went to the church maybe like 2 times a year, but that was pretty much it. So like I said, I wasn't taught religion at home or anything. Despite the fact that I wasn't really taught religion or Christianity at home, I felt always this strange kind of like closeness to God. For me, it was very clear that there is God, kind of like closeness to God. For me, it was very clear that there is God, and I did feel this kind of love and closeness to God from a very young age. Some of my earliest memories would be when I was 5 years old and I was playing in the woods by myself, alone. I always felt that God was with me when I was playing in the woods by myself. I always felt that He was watching over me, He was with me. I felt this closeness to Him. I saw God in everything. I saw God in how the wind would blow into the trees and the leaves would have this sound. And I just saw God, like God's work in the nature and everything. At some point, I was taught these different prayers by my other family members, like my grandparents and my aunties. These prayers like before eating or before sleeping. And I remember when I was a kid that it confused me a lot that all these prayers started by addressing Jesus. And I just remember being really confused, like why I was addressing Jesus and why not God. And this was confusing to me, like why did all the prayers start with the name Jesus and never God? I remember so like clearly that this confused me a lot when I was a kid, because I had such a clear image in my head that there is God, but I couldn't get my head around why I couldn't just pray to God. Why did I have to have a person between me and God? Like, was I not good enough to pray to God? Was I not good enough to talk to God or speak to God? Why did there have to be this one person like between us? So anyway, I remember that being very confusing to me when I was a kid. When I got to elementary school, obviously they started teaching us religion in school. And I remember the more we studied about Christianity, the more I felt disconnected from it. I never agreed with Trinity or like God having a son. A'udhu billah. It just didn't make any sense to me. But I always did feel this closeness to God. So I thought to myself that maybe I don't really need religion. I can just believe in God in my own way. So I don't have to really be bothered about religion and Christianity and all that. Anyway, I was bullied very badly at school, in elementary school. It started kind of out of nowhere. Just suddenly, I think 4th or 5th grade, suddenly this group of older students, they started bullying me. And the bullying became like every day. They called me like all these horrific names all day, every day, wherever I was. They would come to the bathroom if I went there. There was no place to hide from them. It was brutal, absolutely no mercy from these kids. But I could still handle it, and I was taking it quite well because my family was so awesome. I had a very good family life. My parents were like really fun and outgoing, and we were often going like traveling, and we had so much fun together, and we had this safe home environment. So I didn't mind the bullying that much. I was still handling it quite well at that point. Anyway, so then I got into junior high school, and suddenly out of nowhere my parents got divorced, just suddenly. And the divorce process wasn't like a one-time thing that happened, but it was an ongoing process of almost 2 years. And it was very painful for all of us, for the whole family. It was just going like back and forth, and our like the secure, safe home we had until then, it kind of like just broke down, and it was like I didn't have this safe home anymore after that, because our life after their divorce, our life was really unstable, and there was a lot of things happening at home. My mom moved away. I had lost the safe home environment in that point. The bullying continued because it was mostly the same people from our elementary school. They came to the same junior high school as well. I was bullied quite badly in school every day, and I remember I felt so trapped in that situation because I didn't have any safe place to go to anymore. From then on, I felt that I didn't have a home and I didn't belong anywhere. I felt very disconnected from the world and from people. I felt that I was so strange because I was always a very like a deep thinking person. Like I had all these questions about this life, and I had all these big thoughts and hopes and dreams, and I felt like no one else was thinking about that stuff. And I didn't have the support of a family anymore, because my family was basically at that point was just broken, and we were just 4 broken people, me, my dad, my mom, and my brother. So I just felt really trapped. I didn't have any safe place to go to. So I used to go to the church sometimes. I would just go there and I would just cry my eyes out. I would just sit there for hours sometimes and cry. And that was my escape from the world. That was so horrifying at that point, I think. And alhamdulillah, I always felt close to God, and I feel that my belief in God was the thing that got me through all that. Anyway, but because of that, I grew up very quickly, and by the time I was in senior high school, I was already working. I was already living in my own apartment. I was very independent at that point already. My dream was to study psychology and become a psychologist. So after my senior high school, I immediately applied to one of the universities to go study psychology. But I didn't really prepare enough for the exam to get into the university, so I didn't get in. And because I didn't get into the university, so I decided to go traveling. I wanted to go travel the world, or not even the world, I just wanted to go somewhere and to find some answers. I've always been a person who's had these questions, like I always wondered like why God created us, and what's my purpose in this life, and what I should do in this life, and what's the purpose of all this. And I had all these questions, and it wasn't enough for me to just work at a regular job and just pay my bills and only do that. I always felt that I have this bigger purpose and I need to find something. I didn't know actually what I was looking for, but I felt like I need to find something, some answers, something, anything. And maybe because what had happened before, I always, like I said, I felt really disconnected from people. I didn't feel I belonged anywhere in a particular like group or in a particular place, I felt that I just didn't belong anywhere. And I kind of sometimes had these feelings that I just don't belong in this world or something. I was so different from others. I always noticed that other people were just happy with the regular life, and I didn't understand why I had all these huge questions and these thoughts in my head. And I was so sensitive, super emotional, always, and no one else seemed to be. Like, things that were big deal for me were just nothing for others. Others were like, what's the big deal? And for me, it would be a huge thing. So I had all these questions, and I just wanted to go somewhere, run far away, look for anything, basically. So I went to Indonesia because in the late 90s, my dad used to work in Indonesia, and he would always tell stories about Indonesia. So I picked Indonesia. So I went by myself, alone, traveling, and I fell in love with Indonesia. The first time I came here, I noticed that all the people, regardless of their religion, it didn't matter if they were Christian or Muslim or if they were Hindu or Buddhist, all people seemed very spiritual and religious, and they would, like Indonesians, would love to have long conversation with you. They would talk for hours about life, about God, about spirituality, about anything. And I loved it. I loved how connected they were with their spirituality, and I just fell in love with Indonesia. I felt not necessarily belonging, but I felt more at home in Indonesia than ever in Finland, because Finnish people are not spiritual at all. Religion and spirituality are a huge taboo, and I probably never even told anyone that I believed in God, or that I had always had this kind of like I had always felt this closeness to God. I probably never even told anyone, because it's such a taboo. You can't talk about this stuff with Finnish people. So anyway, because I liked Indonesia so much, I decided to move to Indonesia and do anything, just take some study programs, something that enabled me to live here. So I took this like a course, a 6-month course studying Bahasa Indonesia, the Indonesian language here. So I moved to Bali to do that studying program. From very early on, I got a bunch of new friends. Most of them were Balinese, and most Balinese people are Hindus. So I got into Hinduism. I mean, I became really interested in Hinduism because of them, because they often took me in, like, with them to the temple, to their ceremonies, and I was like involved with Hinduism all the time. So I got really interested in it, and I bought a book in English about Hinduism in Bali, and I started learning Hinduism. And it didn't take a long time that I was already like praying with them in the temple. I was taking part in ceremonies. I was making the flower things. If you've ever been to Bali, you know what I mean. I was already making those. I was praying. The first thing I noticed when I started learning Hinduism was that the Vedas, the sacred writings of Hinduism, say that there is only one God, and that there is no picture of that God, but it's just one God. So I thought that maybe this is my religion, because I believe in one God also. Anyway, so I was learning Hinduism, I was studying, I was also like traveling around a lot. And after this course was over, so I just stayed here in Indonesia. I was going around. I was in Bali and then going to Sumatra, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong. I was doing modeling. I was singing in a couple of TV shows and just doing basically anything, living this life of freedom, just doing anything basically, and traveling around and meeting a lot of people. and I was still reading a lot about Hinduism. But after a while, something happened. I noticed that the more I started to know about Hinduism, the more complicated it got. Like, the more I knew, the more difficult it was to understand. Like, the more I knew, the more it started to not make sense. You know what I mean? So I thought to myself, that it's okay. Maybe I can be this person who just knows about all the religions, and then I have my own way of praying to God, and I have my own way of believing in God. Because I always, in my mind, it was so simple. In my mind, it was always just one God, me and God, and that's it. I just want God. I don't want there to be like all this other stuff. Anyway, those were my thoughts. I remember watching the film The Life of Pi, and I was like, maybe I can be like Pi. I'm just going to take a little bit from every religion. After deciding that, I realized that I knew something about Buddhism already. I obviously knew about Hinduism, about Christianity, and then I just realized that I didn't know anything about Islam yet. So I thought, because of the film, I thought that I want to know something about Islam, because I had these huge misconceptions about Islam, and I did have a very negative image of Islam also at that point. I thought that Islam is probably like all the other religions. Probably Muslims pray to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Astaghfirullah. Like the Christians pray to Jesus alayhi salam. Oh, I'm so confused talking about this now. But that's what I thought back then. I was like, it must be just the same as every other religion. There's all this other stuff. And I thought also that Allah is some other God, some new different God from actual God or something. I don't even know what I was thinking. And I also had a very negative image of Muslims, because I saw Muslims often in the Indonesian TV and in the Indonesian TV shows, and they had these TV shows when they were fasting in Ramadan. And I remember watching it when I was living in Bali, and I was like, these people are crazy, man. I was like, in my mind, if you're fasting, it should be for God, and why do you have to like make a big deal out of it in TV in front of all these people? Like, what kind of religion teaches this? Like, what kind of religion teaches you to go on the national TV and go like all loud about how you're fasting and how you're doing all this worship? I was like, what does this Quran teach to people? And then adding to that all the news about terrorism and all that, I was like, what is this religion? But I felt I wanted to know something about it just because I didn't know anything about it. Anyway, at that point, I had been living in Bali for about 1.5 years, and I finally got into a university in the UK to go to study psychology. So I moved to the UK and started my studies, and I remember so clearly, it was one of the first lectures that we had, that they said straight away that there is no such thing as soul. There is no such thing as soul, and we are merely these physical, biological beings. So just forget about that. And I remember being like, oh no, like, I can't agree with that. I was like, of course the human being has a soul. It was so strange to me. It was straight away then and then there I got these bad vibes of, oh no, this might not work out. During my studies also, I came back to this issue time and again. because it was always like this science of psychology trying to explain human behavior and explain the human mind. I don't think they even called it mind, because they can't prove that there is a mind scientifically, maybe. I don't know. Studying about the psychology of a human being, but denying the fact that we are spiritual beings, and denying the fact that the human being has a soul, has a heart, I felt was a cause of the science of psychology not being complete. I felt that they could never really explain the human behavior or human personality fully or perfectly, because they didn't want to admit that a human being has a soul. So I felt whatever I studied, it always got stuck in that thing, that they tried to deny the existence of the soul and the human mind and the heart and the spiritual aspect of us. I came more close with Islam on my time in the UK, and at the time I got this one friend who was a Muslim, and I started asking him questions about Islam. And I remember asking him, why do Muslims fast in Ramadan? And he explained to me that because God told us to fast in Ramadan, and it's a way to express our gratitude of how much God has given us and how much God has done for us. And we give this 1 month fully just for God. And I remember that it made a lot of sense to me, and I thought, I want to do this for God. That sounds so beautiful. I want to do something like that for God also. So after studying 1 year in the UK, I came back to Indonesia for my 3-month summer holiday, and it was straight away Ramadan. So I started doing the Ramadan fasting, or I tried to do it. I think I got some days done, not the whole 30 days, but some days I could do it, and it felt amazing, and it felt also incredibly hard, very, very difficult. And I thought that these Muslims, they have a very strong faith, that they are so strong that they can do this for 30 days, and they seem fine, they're still working and functioning normally. I was like, these people are very strong. Anyway, after that Ramadan, I went to Malaysia, and then I went to Sumatra to do some traveling there by myself. I wanted to go to the north part of Sumatra, so I had to stay in a city called Medan for a couple of nights. I had gone to Sumatra several times before, and I would always stay in this same place in Medan. It was this really nice guest house right next to the biggest masjid of Medan, and I would always stay there when I would go traveling to Sumatra, because usually all the flights go to Medan and then you go from there to wherever you're going. So I was staying in the same guest house as usual, but this time I met this huge friend group that were living in that same area. There was this big family who owned the guest house, and they were all cousins and friends together, and then there were some other friends who were living their neighbors. It was basically just this group of very fun people. They were the same age than me, and I got really close with them in that in those few days that I was staying in Medan before going to Aceh, which is where I was actually going. After my traveling, I came back to Medan, and I stayed for the last month of my holiday there in Medan, just with these people, with this friend group. They were so much fun. They were all Muslim, so I asked them a lot of questions about Islam, and they corrected most of my misconceptions about Islam. They told me that Allah is just an Arabic word for God, so Allah just means God. Like any other religion, it's the God. That's what it means. So I was like, all right, okay, that makes perfect sense. And all their answers made perfect sense to me. I asked them if the Muslims worshipped their Prophet ﷺ, and they said no. The reason why there is no pictures or paintings of the Prophet ﷺ, so that people would not worship him in any way. And I was like, oh, I remember that. I knew that there could not be any pictures of the Prophet ﷺ, and this made perfect sense to me. I was like, that makes so much sense. And it just all became more clear to me. During this 1 month, we just talked a lot about religion, about Islam, and we were just like enjoying life. We were this young group of people. It was so much fun. I felt so happy at that time. So by the end of my holiday, I made this decision that I would quit my studies in the UK and I would move to Indonesia and just do anything, everything, just chase my dreams and look for all these answers that I've been longing for. So I decided to quit my studies. I went back to the UK to work for a couple of months and save up money, and then I came back to Indonesia, and this time I moved to Medan, and I was living in the same guest house next to the biggest masjid of Medan. And even though I knew a little bit more about Islam, I still didn't feel like I need to become a Muslim right away. I thought that I will probably just learn some more, I will study more about Islam. Maybe if it's my thing, then I will like convert to Islam, maybe like after a year or something. This was going on in my mind. So I didn't have a plan to become a Muslim at that point or anything. I just wanted to follow my dreams and live my life and be with this amazing friend group that I had in Medan at that time. Anyway, so let's just leave it there for this video, and then inshallah on the next video, in the next part, I will tell you what happened. Just suddenly this one incident that happened that made me want to take my shahada almost immediately, almost then and there. Inshallah, I will tell you about that in the next part. Thank you for watching this part until the end. See you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.